It's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to The World Today. I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up on the program. Donald Trump says he will unveil a fresh wave of tariffs this week, including 25% on all steel and aluminum imports. China responds to President Trump calling for the U.S. to stop weaponizing trade issues. Plus, Israeli troops withdraw from key military corridor linking southern and northern Gaza. Welcome again, everyone. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will announce a 25% import tax on all steel and aluminum entering the U.S., a move that may have the biggest impact on Canada. Mr. Trump also said that there would be an announcement later in the week about reciprocal tariffs on all countries that tax imports from the U.S., but he did not specify which nations would be targeted or if there would be any exemptions. He told reporters of his plans while traveling from his home in Florida to the Super Bowl in New Orleans on Sunday. Canada and Mexico are two of the U.S. biggest steel trading partners, and Canada is the biggest supplier of aluminum metal to the United States. In response to these latest threats, China's foreign ministry is urging the United States to stop politicizing and weaponizing economic and trade issues, calling for dialogue. Analysts believe Mr. Trump's proposed 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum products heading to the United States may not have a huge impact on China. The country is the world's largest steel producer and exporter, but very little is sent to the United States. Mexico was the top destination for Chinese aluminum product exports last year. Canada also bought 200,000 tons of metal from China. Tariffs of 25% imposed by Mr. Trump in 2018 shut Chinese steel out of the U.S. market. Only 1.8% of imported American steel comes from China. Beijing has cranked up production of aluminum in the last year, raising fears that its excess capacity would swamp global markets. Staying in the United States, President Trump says he expects Elon Musk to find billions of dollars of fraud and abuse at the Pentagon during an audit that the billionaire would lead. President Trump has also defended Elon Musk's drive to shut down sections of the U.S. government amid legal challenges, transparency concerns, and questions over conflicts of interest. Democrats have accused Mr. Musk of personally benefiting from some of the changes that the Trump administration is trying to push through, such as the proposed closure of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. The president says Mr. Musk's unofficial Department of Government Efficiency would soon examine spending in the military and the Department of Education, possibly in the next 24 hours. The Pentagon budget is approaching $1 trillion per year. In December last year, former President Joe Biden signed a bill authorizing $895 billion in defense spending for the fiscal year ending September 30. Mr. Musk, who is the White House, Mr. Musk says is a special government employee, has been tasked to lead an effort to slash the size of the U.S. federal workforce. As part of that initiative, his aides have sought access to confidential information and computer systems of various government agencies. Critics say the efforts are likely illegal, risk exposing classified information, and in practice are gutting entire agencies without congressional approval. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird, joins us now for more. Maria, great to see you again. We're seeing more and more tariffs from President Trump. What's the president's reason for this latest announcement?
Well, the president is requesting that all aluminum and steel are produced in the United States. And so this is a way to increase the amount of items that are produced in the U.S. He has been stating since his campaign, America first, and that we were going to be the producer of the majority of the things that are bought. He believes it's an economic plan to be able to increase the economic base for the United States. And so he has been clear from the beginning. So I think this is just one of the things that he said he would do. And aluminum and steel, I think he's reviewed and seen that there's a lot of import of that coming into the country. And so he believes that tariffs is a way to increase the import and also to decrease some of the costs that the U.S. pays for importing items such as steel and aluminum from China, Mexico, and other countries that we do import those materials from.
And who are those that will really be affected by the U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminium?
So the individuals that will really be impacted are those countries, specifically China is going to be heavily impacted, which we know there has been a counter back and forth between the U.S. and China almost since the president announced that he would be putting these tariffs. The other challenge potentially could be internal to the United States. Obviously, aluminum and steel are one of the major materials used in building and construction in the United States. And so depending on how many of the companies are currently receiving those items for buildings, for construction, I think that could potentially halt and delay some projects unless the U.S. is able to produce enough aluminum and steel at a cost that's going to allow builders to be able to continue to build.
And how are political and economic pundits in the country responding to this latest development?
I think it's not a surprise. I think that obviously there's a lot of analysis around whether or not this is what's best, because obviously trade relations has been a huge part of the economic base globally and obviously in the United States. And so trade relations have been extremely important over the last few decades. And so I think this is a concern for those who believe that the world market is one that the U.S. should be a major player in. But for those who believe that some of the challenges that the U.S. has experienced economically is due to some of their reduction in trade laws and reduction in cost and tariffs, which we clearly see that the president has been putting forward.
About the president's comments on the Department of Government Efficiency that Elon Musk heads, auditing the Pentagon, what's the department hoping to find?
Well, there has been numerous requests by the Government Agency of Efficiency, which is obviously a special agency that has just come into play with this new administration. They're hoping to be able to see where the spending is going. As you heard earlier, the president stated there's $1 trillion that goes into the Department of Defense, trying to understand where those dollars are going. We know the Department of Defense does a large majority of its work through government contractors, which means there's a lot of external spending that's done for sourcing those weaponry materials that are needed for many of the ways in which the U.S. is either protecting its borders or also engaging in global, obviously, events. So that's really, I think, where he's going to be looking. He's also going to be looking to see further around the Treasury Department. He's requested some reports there. The question, though, is whether or not that is within the bounds of the executive office's purview. And so he's going to be looking throughout every agency to see how spending is done, where the spending is actually conducted, and which companies, and if it's internal to the federal government or if it's a lot of external spending as well.
And critics say these efforts are likely illegal, risk exposing classified information, and in practice are gutting entire agencies without congressional approval. Isn't this detrimental to national security?
Well, many are stating that there's major concern around what could be retrieved from these records. The real question is, once the government efficiency agency goes in, where will they be sending this information? How will they use this information for being able to address what the president believes is an overspending in some areas across the government? And so that's the real concern. And then how the information is actually sourced and retrieved. Now, it could be a national security issue. I think that we're in a time period where there's several areas that I think many are concerned around national security areas, and specifically around oversight. Congressional members typically have the ability to have oversight for federal agencies. We know the Department of Education, many congressional members were trying to access the building to be able to look for oversight and to be able to perform their duties and what they're tasked to do as congressmen, but we know that was halted. And so the question is whether or not the three branches of government are able to provide that check and balance of power, which was intended through the Constitution. And so that's where you're going to see whether it's judicial branch of government contesting some of the executive actions or the congressional membership asking for oversight in areas that they're unclear as to why the president is requesting these types of actions. So it's going to be a longer road. But again, the president came in the door promising and stating that he was looking for overspending and looking for ways to decrease spending in the federal government.
On a lighter note, Maria, the Super Bowl on Sunday, how did it go with President Trump attending the ceremony?
Yes, that was definitely outside of traditional presidential orders, especially so close to the beginning of his term. But again, I think that that was one of the areas that the president definitely likes to be. He enjoys being in the media. Many times we hear we're not having as many press briefings. So obviously reporters are not having as much visitation into the press rooms at the White House. But a lot of that is because the president, as we've seen, he does his executive orders right there outside of the Oval Office in the White House. He goes to events like the Super Bowl. And so he is kind of his own spokesperson, more so than having the traditional press secretary provide updates as to the dealings of the White House.
Maria, thanks again. We're not quite done with the United States. President Trump says he has spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone about ending the war in Ukraine. This is according to the New York Post. It's the first known direct conversation between Mr. Putin and the US president since early 2022. Mr. Trump, who has promised to end the war in Ukraine but not yet set out in public how he would do so, said last week that the war was a bloodbath and that his team had had some very good talks. In an interview aboard Air Force One, Mr. Trump told local media that the New York Post that he had better not say when asked how many times he and Mr. Putin had spoken. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told the TASS state news agency that many different communications are emerging. The conflict in eastern Ukraine began in 2014 after a pro-Russian president was toppled in Ukraine's Maidan revolution, and Russia annexed Crimea, with Russian-backed separatist forces fighting Ukraine's armed forces. And on the war in Israel, President Trump says he remains committed to buying and owning the Gaza Strip and relocating the 2 million Palestinians living there, despite global condemnation of the plan he unveiled last week. He told reporters that he might allow Middle East countries to be involved in rebuilding parts of the territory and that he would make sure the Palestinian refugees would, quote, live beautifully. Both the Palestinian Authority and the armed group Hamas, whose 16-month war with Israel has caused widespread devastation in Gaza, reiterated that Palestinian land was not for sale. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised Mr. Trump's proposal as revolutionary and creative. It comes 3 weeks into a fragile ceasefire in Gaza, during which Hamas has released some of the Israeli hostages it's holding in exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. In the meantime, Israeli troops have withdrawn from the Netzarim corridor, a military zone cutting off the north of the Gaza Strip from the south. Hundreds of Palestinians in cars and on carts laden with mattresses and other goods began returning to northern Gaza following the pullout. The Israeli withdrawal is part of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire agreement, under which 16 Israeli hostages and 566 Palestinian prisoners have so far been freed. By the end of the first stage of the ceasefire, in 3 weeks' time, 33 hostages and 1,900 prisoners are expected to have been freed. The Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, has visited an UNRWA-run shelter for internally displaced people in Deir el-Balah just before heading to Jerusalem via the Kerem-Shalom border. Mr. Fletcher met with displaced families who spoke of the hardships they've endured over the past 16 months. He also heard from staff managing the shelter about the ongoing response and challenges they face in providing critical support. The UN Palestinian Agency site is one of the many schools in Gaza that were turned into shelters for displaced families. Mr. Fletcher also met children who are missing out on their education, stressing the need to reopen schools in Gaza as soon as possible. In Jerusalem, the Under-Secretary General met with heads of UN aid agencies and other humanitarian organizations. They discussed ways to sustain the humanitarian scale-up in Gaza, as well as continued support, critical support across the West Bank.
But it's also the people delivering the services. You know, it's not trucks of aid coming in, it's the humanitarian.
Well, in other news concerning Israel, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the stand again today in his ongoing trial for alleged corruption. Mr. Netanyahu is the first sitting Israeli leader to take the stand as a criminal defendant. He's accused of accepting tens of thousands of dollars worth of cigars and champagne from a billionaire Hollywood producer in exchange for assistance with personal and business interests. He's also accused of promoting advantageous regulations for media moguls in exchange for favorable coverage of himself and his family. However, the 75-year-old denies wrongdoing, saying the charges are a witch hunt orchestrated by a hostile media and a biased legal system out to topple his lengthy rule. His testimony caps years of scandals that have swirled around him and his family, who have gained a reputation as enjoying a lavish lifestyle at taxpayers' expense. Welcome back. Leaders from Eastern and Southern Africa are calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where rebels are threatening to overthrow the Congolese government. This was at a summit on the DRC crisis in the Tanzanian city of Dar es Salaam over the weekend. The leaders are also urging Congo's president to directly negotiate with them. President Felix Tshisekedi, who attended by video conference, has previously said that he would never talk to the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels he sees as driven to exploit his country's vast mineral wealth. A communique at the end of the talks urged the resumption of direct negotiations and dialogue with all state and non-state parties, including M23. The rebels seized Goma, the biggest city in eastern Congo, following fighting that left nearly 3,000 people dead and hundreds of thousands of displaced, according to the United Nations. The unprecedented joint summit included leaders from the East African Community Bloc, of which both Rwanda and Congo are members, and those from the Southern African Development Community, or SADC, which includes countries ranging from Congo to South Africa. Kenyan President William Ruto, the current chair of the East African Community, told the summit that dialogue is not a sign of weakness and the lives of millions depend on our ability to navigate the situation.
Leaders.
The time for action is now. The lives of millions depends on our ability to navigate this complex and challenging situation with wisdom, clarity of mind, empathy for the millions whose lives and livelihoods have been plunged into uncertainty. Excellencies, I am confident that you agree with me that dialogue is not a sign of weakness. It is a testament to our collective wisdom and strength, both as leaders and as communities. It shows our capacity to articulate issues patiently and clearly, listen to each other, consult comprehensively with a common goal in mind, and negotiate patiently until we reach a better outcome than the bitter results of bloodshed.
Still on the DRC crisis, UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk is warning of the risk of the violence in the eastern region escalating throughout the Great Lakes sub-region following the recent takeover of Goma City by the Rwandan-backed M23 group. Addressing a special session of the UN Human Rights Council, the High Commissioner said if nothing is done, the worst may be yet to come for the people, but also beyond the country's borders.
I've been following the human rights situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo closely for many years. And what we see today worries me enormously. My office has long been sounding the alarm bells about this crisis, and I'm deeply disturbed to see the violence escalate yet again. If nothing is done, the worst may yet to come for the people of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, but also beyond the country's borders. The risk of violence escalating throughout the sub-region has never been more acute. Once again, civilians are trapped in a spiral of violence in this overwhelming conflict. Since 26 January, almost 3,000 people have been killed and thousands have been injured, and these numbers are probably much smaller than what has really happened. I'm horrified by the spread of sexual violence, which has become an appalling feature of this conflict for a very long time. And it is likely to worsen in the current circumstances, and I feel for the victims and the survivors who I've met when I was there last year. I've always been struck by the fact that the population in Eastern Congo is suffering terribly, while many of the products we consume or that we use, such as our mobile phones, are created using minerals from the east of the country. We are all implicated in this. I call on all parties to lay down their arms, to resume dialogue within the framework of the Luanda and Nairobi processes. We must ensure in these processes that there is a meaningful participation of women, that's guaranteed. In the meantime, all parties to the conflict must respect international human rights law and international humanitarian law. The M23, the Rwandan forces, and all those supporting them must facilitate access to humanitarian aid. In these circumstances, it's crucial to establish the facts and bring the perpetrators to justice. An independent, impartial investigation must be undertaken into all the violations and abuses that were committed by all parties, and I offer my office's support in this regard.
Echoing Mr. Turk's concern, the Special Representative of the Secretary General in the DRC and Chief of the UN Peacekeeping Mission in DRC, Bintou Keita, says the situation is catastrophic in DR Congo. She tells the Human Rights Council that dead bodies still lying in the streets of Goma, which M23 fighters now control. The MONUSCO chief also warns of the health risks linked to the ongoing fighting. In response to the ongoing crisis, DRC's Minister of Communications and Media, Patrick Muyaya, spoke out against the continued logistical, military and financial support of countries, including Rwanda, to armed groups operating in the territory. However, Ambassador James Ngango of Rwanda to the United Nations in Geneva dismissed the claims, insisting that a large-scale attack against Rwanda is imminent.
While I am speaking, youth are being subjected to forced recruitment, and human rights defenders, civil society actors, and journalists have also become a major population at risk. MONUSCO continues to receive requests for individual protection from them, as well as from judicial authorities under threat, and at risk of reprisal from M23 in areas under its control. I reiterate that the humanitarian situation in Goma is catastrophic. The decomposing bodies collected from the streets of Goma prompted WHO to warn of potential epidemics. Medical personnel are facing electricity cuts and lack fuel for their generators. They work under extremely difficult conditions when ensuring the treatment of patients and the functioning of morgues. I again call on the international community to advocate for humanitarian assistance to reach Goma immediately.
The Kinshasa-backed coalition has stockpiled a large number of weapons and military equipment near Rwanda's border, mostly in or around the Goma airport. These weapons include rockets, kamikaze drones, heavy artillery guns capable to shoot precisely within the Rwandan territory. The weapons were not aimed at the threat of operations, at the theater of operations against the M23. Rather, they were pointed directly at Rwanda.
Let's get more on this. Joining us now is Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies Department at the University of Lagos. A pleasure having you today on the program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Maharaja.
Right, so the conflict in the DRC has long been a challenge to the region. What are the primary drivers of the conflict, and how have they evolved over time?
Well, as you know, I used to say it. Since my childhood, I've been hearing Congo War, Katanga War, and where Lubumba was killed and all this, that. It's still on. It's like a recurrent decimal. And for Rwanda and Kagame, it's like a do-or-die war. They seem to see Congo Democratic Republic as a milking cow. And both Kagame and Museveni of Uganda find ways of coming into Congo Democratic Republic to really milk whatever they can milk out in terms of mineral resources for their own personal interests. And the only difference is that in Rwanda, Kagame has made it an issue of a national interest, and getting people in Rwanda to know that their survival depends on what they could pick out from Congo Democratic Republic. And so it goes on like that, and African Union seems not to be interested in arresting such heinous crime that is going on in Congo Democratic Republic, committed by Kagame and his acolytes and Museveni. So I like Kagame, but what he's doing in Congo Democratic Republic is not the best for Africa. It's just like asking Tiani or somebody, Chad, JB, to be penetrating Nigeria from northeast of Nigeria. That becomes very bad, you know. So somebody, African Union, is supposed to wake up, or at most, the Eastern SADC, or whatever they call it, the Eastern state of Africa, or the Great Lakes region, those people there, Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, they should come up and really find a way to arrest the degrading situation that Congo Democratic has found itself since over 50 years now.
And do you believe the legacy of colonialism and historical trauma plays a role in shaping the conflict dynamics?
Well, everybody knows. It's said about Leopoldville and the king of Netherlands or Belgium being the one that expect Congo Democratic to be its own property or the property of Belgium. But as we are talking now, it has nothing to do with Belgium. Belgium seems to be incapacitated anyway, because European Union, well, I agree, Belgium is part of European Union. But what people are saying is that European Union is supporting Rwanda to keep creating problem in Congo Democratic Republic. Well, Is that part of Belgian agenda? That's another different talk to really think about. Otherwise, France that has been accused is not the main issue. France never colonized the Congo Democratic Republic. France colonized rather Congo Republic, which is peaceful. So I don't see, unless European Union seem to be together now to see that Congo Democratic Republic is their property. And they seem to be doing that because whatever people see there is war or ammunition or whatever that comes into Rwanda goes into helping M23. And that is very, very disastrous and very, very unacceptable. It's not acceptable at all by Africa or by United Nations that has kept its own minister there trying to keep peace, and they are killing some of them. And what is United Nations saying? It's supposed to caution European Union in general to see that they stop, supplying arms to Rwanda and Kagame. What we are seeing now is within 1 month, if nothing is done, they will rush into Kinshasa. It's not a big deal for them because the Congolese are not militarily equipped to fight back. Within a month, if this thing is not stopped, they will rush into Kinshasa and Felix Tshisekedi will be overthrown. So it happens with, what do you call him again, the man that took over from Angola sector, and that's, so we have to do something, and African Union and United Nations have to do something before it enters into taking the whole Congo. Because as I know and as I have been informed, Democratic Republic of Congo has no military prowess to fight back M23 and Kagame. That is very certain. So something has to be done. Yes. African Union has to interfere or intervene.
Right, and in this intervention, how confident are you in the role of these regional organizations to actually intervene in this crisis?
Well, thank God that South Africa is complaining. And South Africa, though not part of eastern countries of Africa, ought to put pressure on them, because South Africa is another power within the African setup to put pressure on such a regional organization to do something. Because the most cantankerous people in that region are basically Kagame and Museveni. So if two of them are together and they want to do something wrong to Congo Democratic Republic, there is no way they won't get it done. So you see, it takes African Union to wake up and say, look, Museveni, Kagame, enough is enough. Allow Congo Democratic to be itself and govern itself the best way it could govern itself, so that there will be peace in the entire region. Because if it is not done so, they will see that the lake region, the Great Lake region, will completely be in turmoil. It's not, Uganda is not out of it. They will also fight Uganda. Kagame, well, he seems to be very confident of what he can do and what he cannot do. But unfortunately, it can also affect him. So we need certainly to get it stopped. And African Union should pressurize the eastern countries or countries of eastern region of Africa to do something right now. Just like we are trying in our own way in Nigeria to make ECOWAS not to go beyond control. So also they should find a way to get it not to go beyond control. And first and foremost, Kagame and Museveni should be stopped.
And we're seeing the humanitarian implications of the conflict include the impact on civilians, refugees, and internally displaced persons. What could be the long-term consequences of the conflict on the social, economic, and cultural fabric of the DRC, and how can this be resolved?
Well,
we have seemed to have temporarily lost connection with Dr. Ariole. I will get back to him if we can as soon as possible, but let's just bring you some other stories in the meantime. The U.S. pause in foreign assistance funding has created a lot of confusion in community HIV prevention work, despite the waiver issued for HIV/AIDS programs. This is according to Christine Stegling, Deputy Executive Director of UNAID, the UN agency to combat AIDS, UNAIDS rather. The waiver allows the continuation or resumption of life-saving humanitarian assistance, including HIV treatment. That means 20 million people living with HIV who depend on U.S. aid for their treatment can continue to receive medication. The HIV global response is heavily dependent on funds from the U.S. President's emergency plan for AIDS relief. It finances 70% of the overall AIDS response and directly supports more than 20 million people living with HIV.
The waiver should mean that 20 million people living with HIV that depend on U.S. aid for their treatment can continue their medication. That's 20 million out of the 30 million people living with HIV in the world. Global AIDS response has been heavily dependent on U.S. government funds. 70% of all money for HIV comes from the U.S. government of the global response. There is still a lot of confusion, especially in communities, how the waiver will be implemented. And we're seeing a lot of disruption of delivery of treatment services, especially at the community level. We see that the biggest interruption will be on community health systems, which all of you know have been at the center of our success to HIV. So, for example, in Ethiopia, we have 5,000 public health worker contracts that are funded by U.S. assistance, and all of these in all regions of Ethiopia have been terminated, and 10,000 data clerks, very important in Ethiopia, so that we continue monitoring and ensuring that people are on treatment. As UNAIDS, we estimate that if PEPFAR wasn't reauthorized between 2025 and 2029 and other resources were not found for the HIV response, there would be a 400% increase in AIDS death. That's 6.3 million people, 6.3 million AIDS-related deaths that will occur in future.
Well, I think we have the connection back with Professor Victor Ariole, French and Francophone Studies Department of the University of Lagos. Do we have his connection? If you can hear me, Professor, we are seeing the humanitarian implications of the conflict, including the impact on civilians, refugees, and internally displaced persons. What could be the long-term consequences of the conflict on the social, economic, and cultural fabric of the DRC, and how can this be resolved?
Well, this problem of refugees and displaced persons, it has been all along the issue of Congo Democratic Republic. They are either running into Uganda or into Rwanda. And what is here? Because it's Hutu and still Tutsi problem. We all know that it is partially an ethnic conflict, because the people of Tshisekedi, those who are for Tshisekedi, are basically Lingala and Chiluba people. Now, Lingala and Chiluba, they are not completely welcoming the Hutu and the Tutsi people. So, hello, are you getting me?
Yes, we are getting you. I can hear you.
Yeah, you see, the Lingala and the Chiluba people seem to be dominating, the main administrative and political sphere of Congo Democratic Republic. And they are not allowing the Hutu and the Tutsi to take part. Whereas the Hutu and the Tutsi see themselves as Congolese, and they have their brothers and sisters in Rwanda and in Burundi, and partially in Uganda, displaced. There are displaced Tutsi people in Uganda. And so it's just like a merry-go-round thing, except the Chiluba and the Lingala people who are now suffering what is going on in Goma because they penetrated Goma so as to dominate Goma also. And when they are displaced, of course, they will find their way to Kinshasa or close by Kinshasa, where they have some element of people who claim that, yes, Congo belongs to them. And this is what Africa is suffering everywhere. We don't have a country where you have one group of nationality owning the country based on the colonial division. We are just everywhere. You have Tutsi people in Rwanda, you have them in Burundi, you have them in Uganda, and only Chiluba and Lingala people are 45 in Congo Democratic Republic. And so they won't be so disturbed by the displacement. And that is why I'm worried. Because the military people or the M23 people supported by Kagame will rush into the capital Kinshasa and take over the place. And that is where there will also be catastrophe in terms of street war, street fight. So it's the displacement, refugee. United Nations is there to support refugees. But you can only be refugee if you are out of your country. If they run into Sudan, which is close to them also, or run into Congo Republic, or run into, they have about 9 countries bordering them. Angola is there. They could run into all these places and then they become refugees. And without that, being internally displaced in Congo Democratic Republic will not really help anybody except the Lingala and the Chiluba people. So the Tutsi will be suffering, the Hutus will be suffering within the Congo sphere or Congo region. So it's an issue the United Nations should really debate strongly about and know how to help them out. Because for now, we are talking of Goma, soon it will enter into Kinshasa. So something has to be done and stop that spread of human suffering.
Right, we must thank you for your time today. Welcome back. Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Toga, has visited Manama, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and engaged in bilateral discussions with his Bahraini counterpart, Dr. Abdulatif bin Rashid Al Zayani. The meeting focused on strengthening diplomatic ties, facilitating foreign direct investment from Bahrain, enhancing trade and investment opportunities, and fostering cooperation in the oil and gas sectors, with particular emphasis on onshore projects and development of the 8th train LNG. Both ministers capped the meeting with the signing of a joint communique to foster closer ties and mutual cooperation between the two nations. A total number of 349 pilgrims from 5 states and the FCT are currently at the Holy Land to pray for peace and stability of the country. One of the representatives of the Nigerian Christian Pilgrim Commission, Olubunmi Ayodele, who was part of the exercise to Mount Nebo, says the NCPC has provided a tour guide and other amenities to ensure that every place visited is safe and secure.
Pilgrims from Lagos and other states, including Osun, Ekiti, Oyo, Kwara, and the participants from the Federal Capital Territory arrived safely at Jordan Airport after a 7-hour trip from Lagos, Nigeria. From the airport, the team moved to their residential location in the city of Amman, Jordan. After relaxing, they converge for a Thanksgiving service just before the tour begins. The Lagos State Special Advisor on Christian Matters speaks about divine encounters to the people.
When Elijah was to be taken from Elisha, when he wanted to cross to the other side of the Jordan, the people are waiting that let's see what happened to Elijah, one of his followers. And when Elijah departed, they were waiting, they want to see the result. How Elisha will come back to the other side of the Jordan. And when he got there to the bank of the river, the privilege that he had when he collected that mantle, the Bible says he used that mantle and Jordan departed. And they said to themselves, the spirit of Elijah has descended unto Elisha, and they bowed their head for Elijah. See, you have been coming, or this is the first time of coming here. I want to say to you, your head will be submitted. In the name of Jesus.
Daily itinerary is reeled out, and the people are also encouraged to seek assistance when needed.
We don't want you to suffer in any way. Some of us, our rooms were very cold yesterday night. I had to go round. And today, I believe that it was better overnight. Please, any complaint that you have, always ensure that you tell your leaders. Please, it's very, very important.
Then everyone moves out to join their bus for a tour to Macairos, where John the Baptist was said to have been beheaded. Those who have the fortitude take a long walk to the hilltop stronghold of Herod the Great, and the people engage in prayer.
Spiritually, I knock all your legs.
Over 300 pilgrims are here, and the representative of the NCPC says all necessary things have been done to ensure safety for all.
So far, so good. We've had a very pleasant process all the way from Lagos. We arrived safely without any form of incidents or issue-based things that could affect our traveling arrangement. We settled down very well since yesterday morning. We took yesterday off for everybody to rest and settle down for today's visit, which we have started already as early as 5 o'clock in the morning, where we have the early devotion, took our breakfast, and we are at our first point of call. And at the top of the mount where John the Baptist was beheaded. This is reflected in Mark 6, from verse 17 to 29.
Part of the spiritual lessons that we learn from here is that we need to be determined and we need to be focused. Whatever the challenges that comes to our way, we should have it at the back of our mind that God is there for us, whatever we are passing through. If we can make it to this place, I believe whatever may be the challenges, we will see the end of the challenges. It's a matter of time.
The spiritual journey continues to Mount Nebo, a place steeped in religious significance, where Moses was said to have stood to view the promised land before his death. Day one of the tour was rounded off at the Dead Sea, also called the Salt Sea, bordering Jordan to the east and Israel and the West Bank to the west. The Dead Sea is 377 meters deep, the deepest hypersaline lake in the world.
The proliferation of artificial intelligence in many activities today is a hallmark of innovation. Its incursion into the creative space has, however, been a subject for debate. Our next report takes a look at AI's presence or lack of it in the Nigerian music soundscape, popularly known as Afrobeats.
This early January, AI-generated video of a purported new single by incarcerated R&B legend R. Kelly got the music world in a buzz. The delivery, the voice and lyrics is almost reminiscent of his musical genius. However, this is a 100% product of artificial intelligence.
A storm in my soul when no calm will show.
It stands as perhaps the most glaring display till date of what AI is capable of in the music industry. Back in Nigeria, the use of the tech tool has permeated many industries, and it's inevitably getting into the Afrobeat space. Here, music coach and teacher is demonstrating the effectiveness of AI in Afrobeat basics. And volunteers within minutes have created original music. Some of these guys have never tried music production until this day. Here is music producer and sound engineer Bolaji Williams, popularly known as Face Up. His long list of credits includes works with Burna Boy in the music and works on the Black Panther, Wakanda Forever soundtrack in the movie Lane. For him, he believes AI can only work on the periphery of the arts, especially in Afrobeats, for specific reasons.
Afrobeat does not sound like one type of music. Country music sounds like one type of music. The moment you hear the rhythm, the bass, the drum line, you already know this is country music. Reggae music, the moment you hear tika, tika, you already know it's reggae. You understand? Hip-hop, the moment you hear you understand? But Afrobeat is rhythm, drumline, shakers, different moods. But what makes Afrobeat is the percussion, and all the time the percussions are always playing different things, different rhythms, but it's still the same sound, and that has been very, very difficult for AI to recreate. Music has soul, music has spirituality. These are emotions of a creative that has been brought into light, and I think that's something that's very difficult for AI to create as well. So when you're using AI for anything music, it just gives you the final product, which we call the wave file. It just give you one file. Now, unlike when you're producing in the studio, you have access to everything. You have access to every sound. You have access to every channel. You can tone something down. It's too much here. This one is good here. Let me bring this one here. You can't do all the arrangement with AI. AI just comes and gives you why. This is the answer to what you requested. Is it that you like it or you don't like it? If you don't like it, you tell it to create another one.
Even at that, he admits AI is already making impressive incursions into some other creative spaces.
The people in the movie industry, gaming industry, what else again, they've been enjoying AI. Because sometimes when they are creating sound for their content, it's not necessarily Afrobeats. So they can create sound from AI, or they do most of the times. Yes, a lot of hats that you hear on TV, the soundtrack is usually AI. They can. It's easy to also generate Foley sounds for movies via AI, but it's difficult to generate anything Afrobeats. That I'm sure.
Nigerian Afrobeat is gaining global attention, and recently Singer Thames bagged a second Grammy trophy. Many believe it is only a matter of time before AI is adapted to suit the creativity behind the music genre, and its use then becomes the order of the day. Eddie's award Ayo Animation advised that the industry must be open when it happens.
30, 40 years ago, it used to be like live music. They produced in the studio. Then it now became, they had some analog stuff right there. Then it now became digital. Then once it becomes AI and everybody is making AI, you're going to have to adapt to the order of the day. You're going to have to adapt if that's what everybody is submitting. And even if it's AI that is helping to screen for nomination, so be it.
The usage of AI during the creative process in Afrobeat is at best minimal at this time. But if the effect of the tech tool in other industries anything to go by, it might be only a matter of time before it is perfected.
That's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.